So hi everyone, I'm Phil. I'm the program leader for the games course at Escape. I've been working in video games for over 10 years and then teaching for 6. So starting out on games like RuneScape and then moving to Harry Potter and Silent Hill. But here we're going to, mostly I was working as an environment artist or outsource manager, and then moved into lighting just as more of a generalist as part of the job. But for today, we're really going to specialize in lighting, and it's what I've been teaching for a while now at Escape as well. So what we're going to do today is build a little scene and light it, and I'll go through a lot of the commonly used lighting features inside of Unreal and try and work towards some kind of concept. I mean, this is quite ambitious for 45 minutes, and ideally you guys would be able to work along with me, but not to worry too much if I leave you behind. There will be a video and an opportunity to ask any questions at the end. But with that said, I'm going to jump in and get started. So if you'd like to open Unreal, obviously take a seat and turn on Unreal. And like I say, if you don't want to follow along and you just want to observe and take notes, then that's perfectly fine as well. Like I say, the video of this session will be released in probably next week at some point, so you could go over it at your own pace. So to start with, I'm just going to start a games project. So this is just the window you get to when you open up Unreal Editor. And then I'm just going to hit next. I'm going to create a blank project. So hit next, and I'm going to leave the starter content on. So we'll use some starter content just to be able to assemble a scene that we can then light. Give it a name. So lighting underscore web, and then create project. And nice. So as part of the lighting as well, a big part of when we're making lighting is we build lighting. So there'll be quite a lot of processing involved during the webinar as well. So I'm going to try and keep my settings relatively low throughout, just so I don't end up with really long build times. And this is all going to make more sense as I describe it as we go through. So to start with, we have our empty, well, not empty, our default scene. It has a few odds and ends in there already. I don't want any of this stuff. I want you to understand 100% what I put into Unreal. So I'm going to go to File at the top, New Level, and Empty Level. And that's just going to give me the infinite empty blackness of Unreal Editor. And to start with, we're just going to make a little room. So I'm going to go into Geometry at the side. And these are kind of the native brushes inside of Unreal. They can be edited inside the engine. And we just want to make a room shape. So I'm going to drag in a box and drop it, and I can press this little reset to default on this little yellow arrow. So that's right in the middle of the world. Hopefully you know how to navigate around in Unreal, but if not, you can always just right mouse and it's WSDA. If I scroll the middle mouse button while I'm doing it backwards or forwards, it'll slow my camera down or speed it up. So that's quite a nice way of moving around. And E and Q will be up and down. So it's moving more like a game, I guess. But you do get used to it, and it's quite a comfortable way to move around. So what I want to do is scale this up to be the size of a room. So let's say we're going to go 7 wide, 5 deep. Let's zoom out a little bit. That's probably a bit deep, maybe 3. And tall, I'm going to go 3, and this is looking like a little wider, 4 there. So under scale, 7, 4, and 3, and that's going to be the size of my room. And what I'm going to want to do next is duplicate this object. So to duplicate inside of Unreal, you can just hold down Alt and then drag it to the side, and we've just made a duplicate of that cube that's sitting over the top of the other one. And the nice thing about these brushes is that we can use them to Boolean objects. So I can set it from additive to subtractive. And that way this cube cuts from this cube. And then if I was to scale this down a little bit, you can see it's snapping slightly from the 10 units step snap. Ooh, let's get that box again. I can give myself a roof and a floor. And I'll scale it this way a little bit. And I've given myself a couple of walls. So I've got 2 walls, a roof, and a floor, and that's fine. I'm going to add some windows onto this side. So just grab another box, drag that in, set that one to subtract, and then I'm just going to move it so it intersects over here. So you can see this is cutting a hole or a window shape in here. I'm just scaling the objects, and that's just W, E, and R to go for your scale, rotate, and translate. So I have one big window there. Oh, that's there. I'll hold down Alt and move, and if I hold down Alt and Shift at the same time, it'll move the camera and duplicate the object at the same time. So that's quite a nice way to navigate around. Cool, so now we have a room with 2 windows. And I want to kind of work from a particular concept. I think it's always a good idea when lighting to look up something that you're trying to achieve. Obviously, I'm going to be exploring quite a lot of the different lights in this session, but I'll have a main goal in mind. So the image I want to look at is going to be from a well-known concept artist. Let me just find his reference, Sid Mead, and his Visual Futures. I'll just hunt down a reference for this type. Sid Mead. So it's always a good idea to look at artists that kind of inspire you and whose artwork you really like, and then to look to recreate it. You're really going to learn a lot by copying initially. Certainly when you're starting out in lighting, it's just looking at cool artwork and thinking about the composition, the arrangement, the way that things are framed within frames, the different color palettes. I really like Sid Mead's stuff because it's just got a really cool, rich color palette as well. So we're going to try and work towards something that looks a little bit like this, but also explore a lot of the tools along the way. Of course, I'm going to add some of these columns. So I'm just going to drag in another box and scale it down a little bit, but make it quite tall. So I'll make it like a column size, something like there. Maybe better. And that should do. And then I'm going to duplicate that again. So just hold down Alt, move it up. Let's scale that down again. Rotate it a tad. And then I'll subtract that object from the other object. So under our geometry, additive, take it to subtractive. Then that's cut that chunk out of there. And so if I look at that reference that I was looking at, you can see these columns have got kind of a slight tapering down there. Nice. So now we've got our column and our wall. We need to turn these into normal bits of static geometry. So these are our Unreal geometry, and we'd have, if we imported FBX files or any 3D models, they would come in as a static mesh. So we're going to convert these to static mesh as well. So I'm just going to select the bottom 2 that I created that made that column. Scroll down to where it says that little drop down arrow, create static mesh, and I'll just hit that. And give it a name. We'll call it SM underscore. Oh no, it's going to go. That's the folder it's going to go into. So it's going to go into the content folder. And down here, we're going to call it SM underscore column. Nice. And this one, we're going to do the same. So select all your remaining brushes. And then create static mesh. And this one will be SM underscore room. Nice. Cool, so we've got our room and we've got our column. We're going to want a few of these columns as they kind of run along the side here. I'm going to scale you up a little bit. Yeah, something like that. That'll be fine. And it's okay that it intersects slightly over there as well. And then I'm just going to hold down, I might up the grid snap to 50 and just duplicate a bunch of these across the front. So nice and evenly distributed. Let's stick that one over there. And move that one here. Okay, so we've got the base shape of our scene. I'm just going to pick a position for our camera to kind of shoot from. So similar to where we had that reference shot. So probably a low angle over here that was kind of framing the vehicle. And once you've picked kind of a camera position that you'd like to store, you can just press Control and the 1 key. And then when I move around and press 1, it's always going to chuck me back in that position. So I could go over here and press Control 2, over here and press Control 3, and then 1, 2, and 3 will take me to those positions. So it's going to be really useful when you're setting up your lighting and you're seeing how things are being affected by your lighting. So for this project, I brought in some starter content. So the default starter content that comes with Unreal. In there, you will find materials. I'm just going to drag on this basic wall and drop it on. Well, rather than dragging and dropping, we can actually double click on the static mesh and assign the wall material. If I type wall up here, got a basic wall, and that's going to go onto our column. Select this one and do the same thing. Basic wall. Nice. Save that. Nice. And so now all we have is a completely white scene, and that's because there's no light information in here. All we're seeing is the color of that texture and the black world. So we want to bring in a light to start seeing some shadows and some interest. So I'm going to start with a directional light. So to access our lights, we can go to lights on the modes tab over here and just drag in a directional light. And the way a directional light would behave inside of Unreal is it's kind of an infinite light source, so it will never degrade over distance. So no matter what I put in, it's always going to carry across, and we can position it and use it generally like you would a sun. So I'm going to have it do the initial casting of shadows. I can press 1 to always drop back into that reference shot. If I look at the what we were looking at with the Sid Mead, it was a nice high angle over here. We've got a bit of a sunset going on. So I'm going to, more or less, I've kind of copied that. And what you're going to see on the mesh is this preview tons and tons of times. And the reason it's saying preview is because the lighting has not been built. You can see up here as well, it says lighting needs to be rebuilt. And this is because it's a stationary light or a static light. Both of these options will create textures based on the lighting and map them to our objects. So this is, let's say, more efficient or cheaper than it would be to have lighting that updates every frame if you're playing a game or doing any kind of real-time performance. You want things to be calculated before the game or project starts, ideally, and that way they're not going to have an impact on your frame rate like a dynamic light would. So if I hover over for these options, you'll see static light is fully baked lighting, but with fastest rendering. So it's completely baked into textures and will run really quickly, but the build times will be, it's got to generate textures as maps that we're going to look at. Stationary is a bit of both of movable and static. You can change some elements during runtime, so like color and intensity, but it will still bake textures to make our lighting, so they won't update during the gameplay. And an example of when you're going to see a fully dynamic game would be something like, I don't know, Fortnite, where you've got environments that are completely changing all of the time, and the shadows need to kind of update with those new geometries going in. So you'd run a completely dynamic project, and so, but it is a lot more expensive. So you'd have to sacrifice things elsewhere, really, along the way. A lot of the time, you're generally seeing hybrids where you'd have maybe a movable directional light and lots of smaller lights that were baked. But so we can really see how these baked lights are working. I'm just going to go back to stationary and then hit build at the top. And currently build quality is set to preview, which we're going to keep it on probably for this whole video, because these production builds, although they will increase your quality, they're going to really add time to how long it takes to build, almost up to 20 minutes sometimes. So that will be the best part of our session, watching a building side, or building. We're just going to go preview mode and just hit build. And we'll wait for that result. Cool, and that's gone completely black, so completely disappeared. So we've got obviously a little problem with our light map. So if I select our geometry, double click on our mesh, and we go into our lighting options, what we've got essentially is 2 UV sets. So we've got UV set 1. This is handling our material. So if we were putting bricks on here or concrete or whatever, it's going to be mapped on this texture sheet, which repeats over a surface. So it doesn't necessarily work in this space, which would be the texture space. If I go into channel 2, this would be for your light map. So your lighting would be drawn on this set of UVs. and your textures on this set of UVs. And the reason that would be is because you couldn't repeat a light map texture. You couldn't have the same shadow twice repeating in a place. It would start to look odd. You're going to need unique shadows on all of your mesh. The reason we were getting it rendering black is because this one's not being referenced. If I scroll down into general settings, and this was more of a byproduct of using the mesh that I did, is that when I converted it, its light map coordinate index is 0, so it's referencing this UV set for the light map, and we want it to reference this one. So I will change that to being light map 1, and now it's going to look here for its light map. So if I save that, jump back in and rebuild, we can see now that we have some lighting information. It is pretty rubbish, but it is there and it's staying. So let's go back to that model again and find out why that wasn't particularly good. And again, scrolling down, I can see in my light map resolution, I'm set to 4 pixels. So what we're seeing is a light map, which is made up of only 4 pixels. So it's not going to have an awful lot of detail on it. So let's go back into there and adjust that to something higher, maybe a 512 for now. And then I'll save that. And then press build. So but obviously up in this, it's going to start to increase the time it takes to go through the building process. But you can see we've now got some lighting information in our scene. Let me just hide that grid. And we can go to a lit only mode up here, so you can just see what the lighting's doing. So lighting only. And now the shadows aren't great. They're still a little bit mungy, but it is only a 512 texture cut across this entire object. We'd have to do the same thing to these columns. So I'm just going to select one of these, go through and just increase this, that, and save that one. And so I just repeat the same process to get some lighting on here. Nice. So let's just build that again. You'll notice the further that I go through this process, the louder my computer will get, and that is inevitable as we start to add more and more complex lighting inside our scene. And one thing that will greatly increase our build times as well is not setting out any area particularly to prioritize in terms of lighting. And we can do that by using a light mass importance volume. We can find that up here. If I type in light mass importance volume, I can drag that in. And this volume is essentially anything inside this cube is going to be lit, and anything out of it is going to be low priority. So if we had a vista or something outside that didn't need as complex lighting, we would exclude it from this cube. And this will, like I say, improve how long it takes to build lighting as well, because it's not caring so much about the infinite empty space. Nice. So once we've got that in, another thing we want to add is a post-processing volume, because what you'll notice is when I move around is that lighting is being adjusted slightly. What we have is kind of an auto exposure inside of Unreal. So kind of like when you walk from a dark space to a light space, you see your eyes will adjust for lighting, and Unreal is always adjusting our lighting to counteract that. So what we can do is bring in a post-processing volume, and I'll explain what that is as well. So if I type post-process, drop that in. It doesn't matter so much where this one is, because although we can set it so it only works when I go inside the volume, we also have another option, if I scroll down, to set it to infinite extent. So this means that it works everywhere, regardless of where I go, rather than working inside this volume. Nice. So some of the settings that I want to change on here are going to be under the exposure. What I want to do is set the min and max brightness just to 1. So that's just clamped at 1. And exposure compensation, set that to 0. You can see it's getting a little darker because that's the actual lighting that we're getting. And I will also change the slope, toe and shoulder. Again, this is just putting in some default best practice settings. So in here, usually for 0.6 and 0.5, that's fine. And shoulder, I think 25. Nice, that's it. Again, giving us a more neutral scene to start with. We're getting quite a lot of light information just from the color of our texture, so it's staying relatively bright, but that gives us a nice default base that won't change as we start to edit the scene. Okay, so there's a few more elements I want to add. I'm just going to hide this icon. If I press G on my keyboard, it'll remove any icons temporarily and go into a game mode. I'm going to go back to my basics tab and just grab a sphere. I just want to put this vehicle that we saw in our reference into the scene. Now we have a light. Turn off some of this snapping. If you lose an object, just F, and that will reframe it, making it much easier to orientate around. So I've got my front wheel. Just going to hold down Alt, drag across, have a second wheel, and then Alt, and we'll make this middle section. I don't think it is actually a vehicle. I think it's some kind of dining section. Just looking at that reference, looks like they're sitting down using a laptop or something. So whatever, it's nice and it's reflective, and it'll look quite cool in a final shot. So let's try and get that to frame. Okay. So let's go add a material for this as well, just to give it some reflection. In here we've got maybe a metal brushed nickel. I'll just drag and drop that onto here. I'm going to turn off lighting only so I can actually see my objects. Then I've got these three metal parts. Framing seems okay. Might move it forward a little bit. You can adjust your camera again, and then it's just a matter of hitting Control 1 again, and that will store that position. Right, so whenever we're using any reflective surfaces inside of Unreal, we need a reflection capture. So to get there, you can just type reflection up here. And we've got a box reflection capture. I'm just going to drag that in. Press G so you can see its visual self. By moving it around, what it's doing is kind of capturing our environment and projecting it as its reflections in our objects. If I go to reflection only, so reflections, you can kind of see what it's capturing. Not an awful lot at the moment. All we've got is a white room and a black infinite world. So all we're getting in our reflection on our object is white and black objects. So I will leave that for a second and move on to adding, talking a little bit more about the directional light in the scene. So if I just grab it and we'll start to have a look at some of the different attributes that come with the directional light. So one, you've got a lux. So lux is the metrics that we use for lighting in Unreal. It's quite powerful. So if I was to put that to 30, you see it gets a lot brighter. Down to 2, it does jump quite a lot in increments. But I'm going to leave it at 2, so something a bit more subtle. Down below that, we have our light color. So I can click on this and obviously pick anywhere on the color wheel if I want to have different color light pouring in. Actually, I'll reset that. If ever I want to reset any of these settings back to how they were, I can again click on these little yellow arrows and it will reset it back to how it was. A little lower, we have temperature. So that's what I'm going to use to start with. And by turning on temperature, I can then use this gauge to ramp up or down in the temperature. So it works on a Kelvin scale. So this would be kind of the very warm orange end, or you can go to a very cold and see the difference between those two. So I'm going to go quite warm with that outside light and press build. And you can see we've got really warm looking scene now because I've really pushed the orange coming through. In our reference, we have a bit more of a blue backlighting in here. So I guess there's a few different ways we could introduce that blue, whether it be through different objects that might project blue. There could be shop fronts that are kind of blue, or across the side here. So let's bring in a blue light. So looking at the next light, if we go lights over here, lights. We've got a point light. So I'm just going to drag a point light in. And a point light is the light that behaves the most like a light bulb. So it will project in all different directions, all 8 directions at once, in kind of an omni circle. And we have the same attributes, similar attributes to what you had on the directional light. So again, we've got our intensity, our color, attention radius, and attention radius is how far this light will carry. So you see this blue circle, if I was to adjust that, is how far across the world that light is going to affect anything. And down here we have our source radius, so how big the bulb is, how soft the edging of the light is. Source length will allow us to make kind of a tube light, which we'll look at in a second. And again, we've got use temperature, so I can push this probably to the opposite end of the Kelvin scale just to get it to be that blue going into orange, or I can put it outside so it's cast through. Oh no, I'll keep it in the building. I think that would be better, because I don't want to be projecting shadows of these windows into the environment. I don't see any of that in the final scene. And if I want to look at the scaling of the light, so the source length, I can put some more reflective surfaces into this environment. So if I select this environment, again, if I look at my reference, I can see there's reflection in some of this surface. It's got some polish to it. So if I go to my basic wall material and double click on it, I can adjust this roughness value. Roughness is what's going to be the reflective elements of the kind of dust and weathering of your surface. So if I take that down to a 0.3, maybe go even lower, 0.06. And now you can really see that's got a bit of reflection in that material. So I'll just apply that, and that should update across the scene. Nice, so you've got a bit of reflection in the walls now, and you can see the source of the light, this circle over here, and that's the bulb at the moment on our point light. But if I select that, and then go to my source length and drag along it, what you should see in that reflection is the light shape gets longer, much longer, like a long tube light or something like that. So I'm going to make this quite long, and then I'm going to rotate it with my rotation snap set to 45, and that way I can just quickly and put it across there. I'm going to have this as just kind of a wide light source, so making sure I can see across. I hadn't intended on looking in that direction so much, so when I go into one, I'm seeing some of this blue coming through, meeting some of the orange, and really trying to work out that gradient. So the attention radius carries up to the front of the vehicle, which is what I wanted. And the other settings, I'm sure, can remain the same. The other setting that you might tweak as well with the directional light would be the indirect light in intensity. So that's kind of this area here, really, the lighting that bounced up, how many bounces from our lighting are going to be cast around the scene. So obviously pushing this up would give me a lighter room, but it would also actually bring in more of the orange, which I didn't want to. But it's good that you understand what that function will do in terms of adding more bounces to your light, thus pushing the global illumination of your scene. Nice. So the next thing I want to look at is some hdri lighting. So using a skylight. So in here, if I type in sky, you'll see this skylight. I'm going to drag that into the scene. And what the skylight is it kind of houses the cube map. So by default, it will capture the scene. So it will take a picture of the scene around it, and it will boost the lighting based on that image. And that's what we can do also using HDRI. So using images that we downloaded. So there's some great websites for finding HDRI lighting. So if I just type in HDR Haven. Haven's pretty good and it's free, and I don't have to sign up or anything. I can just go immediately to their HDRIs, and you'll see what I mean. They're kind of projections of the world around, and you can use them to mimic the lighting of your scene. So I'm probably not going to find the sunset that I wanted, but I will just grab one just to show you how they work, because they're important as part of maybe a VFX production pipeline would use something like this, or you're certainly starting to see it more and more in games projects. So once you've found it, you could go 4K, you could have really big. I might just do 2K just so we can see what the quality of what it's doing. And just see that downloaded. And then I'll go back into Unreal, just go to my content. I'm going to save my progress so far, just in case it all goes horribly wrong and crashes. So just a file, save all, and I'll just call this visual underscore future. Nice, so that's our map saved. And I'm just going to drag in that HDRI. So I've got it on the other screen, so just drag in and drop it. And we can see that that's loaded in. So if I double click on it, this is our image. And you can see it's being compressed down to 512, so we're kind of losing some of the quality. So if I go into the drop down here, and where it says maximum texture size, I think we've got 2048, so we'll put that up to 2048. And if we scroll down a little further, it's just processing that boost from 512 to 2048. Okay, see that just all boosted in size. And then if I go down a little further, you'll see you've got this MIP gen settings. So MIP maps are how the textures are compressed over distance, and we don't want that. We're just going to keep it at high quality. So I'm going to turn on no MIP maps. For video games, you probably definitely want to have that on because you want things optimized over a distance. Cool, and then we can load it into our cube map. So if I drag it, change this to as specified, and then drag it and drop it, you'll see that that's now in the scene, and it's kind of boosting our lighting, like power 1 down the bottom. To really visualize it, let's try and up a bit more of the reflection out of this. Nickel roughness 0. Here I am. I'm seeing the colour in the environment. I'm seeing an awful lot of it in there. Let me just can you see it rotates? So visualize it. I think to really visualize it, I might have to put in a plugin quickly. So let me just go to settings, project settings, or plugins. Click on plugin and type in HDR backdrop. I'm just going to press enabled, and I'll need to restart Unreal for it to work, but it'll be worth it. So it might give you a chance to catch up because I've been rocking through pretty quickly. I guess we're at 36 minutes in, so I do tend to speed up. And I'll probably just turn off my camera just to make sure things speed up. Nice. Cool, so that restarted. And then I can go to where it says type in HDRI, and you've now got this HDRI backdrop. and I can drop that into my scene and actually see a nice visual of that HDRI. I will need to rebuild. So the reason I wasn't seeing it before in here is because you actually have to build them in the same way as you would lighting. So if I'm going to build, you also have a build reflection captures. But I will build all at this point just, and I'll switch my HDRI for the one that I picked as a Q map, which was this one. This was the one that we downloaded. It was slightly lower res than one that loaded up by default. Then you can see the difference and why using maybe a 4K or 8K. I've seen 8K skyboxes like this before being used to get that quality nice and high. And let's see, tap projecting. And again, there's things that you can kind of rotate and play around with and use for a different scene. And I want to show you this as one way of kind of lighting an environment, but I'm going to actually get rid of it now just because I'm not going to use it as the way I'm going to light this scene. So I'll just dump the, I'll go back to doing it capture based and remove that object I just added, the HDR backdrop. But I did want to show you that that is possible to grab that, and it's great for if you want to light individual assets within a HDRI. And what we're going to do is actually build a bit more of a world to capture. So I'm going to zoom out, type in landscape, and drag that into the scene, and set that to being smaller, so maybe 2 by 2, and hit create. Well, actually, don't hit create just yet. I'm just going to position it below the world just to make sure I can still see it. Put it forward as well. We're just really concentrating on this view over here. Then I can hit create, and I'll just do a bit of sculpting on here, just trying to recreate the mountains that it had in its reference. So I'll draw some big old mountains onto this side. We can use height maps and things using the landscape tool in Unreal, which is going to give you obviously much more accurate. You can get images that are lifted of actual terrains that we can just drop in and be super accurate when creating worlds. But I'm just going to do a quick sculpted version. So holding down shift, I can cut it down, or normal drawing, or add, and it's all on the normal sculpt function. I have like a flatten if I want to flatten things closer to the environment, but if I press 1, you can see what I just added, which was a bit more of a terrain. Don't really need that bit so much. I'll pop that down. Okay, so we've got a bit of a terrain. What we also need is a sky. So there's a couple of ways of doing skies inside of Unreal. If I come out of my landscape mode, so it's back to select, I'm just going to put a quick material on that floor as well. We've got like a, what can we use? Rock sandstone, that'll be fine. So I'm just going to, usually with landscapes you'd use some kind of blend material where you go from grass to rock or something like that. I'm just going to drop on that standard material. And to bring in the sky, so like I said, there's a couple of ways you can do skies. So there's the older method that I would usually use, which is if I just type in sky, you get a BPR sky sphere. I can drag that, drop it in my scene, and what that looks like is a giant dome that surrounds the world. And I press F on something to zoom back in again. And you need to link these skies with a directional light to determine the time of day. Obviously the sun's over there and we kind of want it over here. So if I actually select on that BP sky sphere, and where I've got directional light actor, switch that out for that directional light. And now the time of day is determined by the direction of this light, which, although I've got my shadows where I wanted them, I haven't really got the right time of day. I could go in and edit the look of the clouds and things like that and bring some more orange in. Or I could have 2 directional lights. So let's say I press Alt and drag, and I leave this one doing the shadows over here. I say to this one, turn off effects world and cast shadows. But I link this one, which I'll rename just so I don't get confused, to sky color. Sure. And then I'm going to link this one to our BP sky sphere. Sky color. And then I can rotate this one independently, and when I press rebuild, I think that's linked. Rebuild should update our sky dome. I can see it got a little bit more of an evening now. I could roll that even more, but it hasn't changed where the shadows. I mean, it means that it's kind of fake. It's not really, the sun's not in the right position, but I'm kind of getting the look closer to the look of what I wanted. Ooh, that might be skylight still. Let's map about that. Small by. Okay, so that's one method of doing skies. I can tweak that and push the bloom and get it to feel a bit more natural. But I'm going to lose that method because a newer version came out in 4.25. Was it 4.24? One or the other, which looks a bit cooler and works a lot better, in my opinion. So with your directional light selected, I can scroll down to looking directional light. Okay, so under the options in light, you can go down to where it says atmosphere, fog, sun, and turn that on. And then here, we want this sky atmosphere. I'm going to drag that into the scene. And what that's done is dragged in an atmosphere to go with our sun. So to position our sun, there's a hotkey, which is Control L, and then all I'm doing is moving my cursor, and that's moving the position of where the sun is. So that was Control L, and then I can try and position this a little better. You can see I'm moving the sun around. I'm just trying to position it over the back of these hills. If I press 1, and kind of see where I'm at now. So Control L, right mouse. So I want to put the sun probably over here somewhere. That's quite nice. Just cutting across, and that's actually doing all the shadows. I mean, the shadows are now a little bit more lean than I wanted. So Control L, maybe I'll make it a tad taller. I still kind of want to see the sun. So around there, that'll be fine. And over here, we have our attributes for our new sun. So we have an atmosphere, so our Rayleigh, which if I adjust, you can see really kind of adjusts the atmosphere around the sun, or the environment around the sun. You get some very deep reds or go into that orange. This would be more for the dust particles in the air, so the me scattering scale. Again, I can adjust it to get the color of the sun that I want. And we have an absorption scale as well. So again, we can adjust to get a more natural look. And nice strong sun. Oh, and we can see it's actually created like an atmosphere around the entire world. What you can do actually is if I change my camera settings to something like 100 or maybe 200 and go super fast, you can see I'll start to rise above the atmosphere that's there and head towards the sun, and you can almost, if I zoom up really high, start to leave the world, and you can see it's really kind of recreating a whole universe essentially, and we can put moons and planets up here and they will still visualize the same if I was if I was down here. So it's a really, really powerful tool for making cool skies. Nice. And we can still add our exponential fog, so adding some fog to the scene as well to add a bit more atmosphere. So if I type in exponential height fog and drag that in, this is going to be the fog for the height going up. So I'm going to change the color of our fog. Well, what we can do, rather than changing the color of the fog, we can have the fog inherit the color of our sun at the top here. And the way we would do that, if I just actually show you what's going on with this fog beforehand. So obviously it's just blue now. down the bottom. Yeah, come back. Right. It's because I've left my camera settings on a crazy high speed, so I'm flying around. So I do remember to set that back to a 1 if ever you change it, and that way you can go back to moving it at a reasonable speed. Cool thing with the exponential height fog is we can add volumetrics to it as well. So what I mean is if I turn on volumetric fog, it starts to, let's make it a bit stronger so you can actually see what's going on. We should start to get some little light shafts working in between the blooming of the light. And we can really push this, maybe tweak some of these values. But like I said, I want us to inherit the color of the actual sunlight. So to do that, 1 second. I think it's enable height fog. Well, actually, it's in the settings. So to do that, you have to go actually into the project settings. For project settings, type in height. What we want is support sky atmosphere affecting height fog, and that's going to allow us to inherit the color of the sky, the sun, into the height fog. It will of course want me to restart Unreal, so let me just save what I'm doing. Also Control-Shift-S will save everything, and I'll just hit restart now. And whilst that's restarting, I will point you to a couple more lighting artists as well that would be great to look at to help build on your knowledge, and some things that I look at as well when I was learning. So just as a point of reference, these ones are really good. I'm going to grab it from my other screen. So these ones are really good. From Horanis, this is our Unreal Evangelist, and he does a similar thing with this skylight. So he really goes through it and explores it in detail. So adding it, and then you can see like what it looks like with an actual planet inside it as well, which are really amazing. Brings in some proper moons and plays around with it all in real time, so you can see these really cool effects being used, and also introducing clouds into it as well as a height map. So I definitely recommend looking over this video. This is quite a new process inside of Unreal, so well worth checking out and getting up to speed with. Much better than the original one. Another artist, lighting artist who does some nice, just some well-made video tutorials really, which I like to look at, is Ryan Manning. I was just looking at his interior lighting series, and it's got some excellent videos on there. I start talking more about light maps and light map density and understanding how to light for more architectural visualization, I guess, than games. But it's all kind of becoming the same thing. I'm speaking to as many VFX artists as I am games artists these days in regards to Unreal Editor. Let's go back to my content, open my map. Cool, so now if I go into my fog, exponential height fog, and I turn these both to black, so having no information in them at all. So this one and this one just go completely to black, no color in them at all. It should now just inherit the color of the sun in our fog. So now when we play around with the fog, it's actually based on the sky color, which is going to be much better for what we want to do. Other things, let's build this lighting and see what we're getting. Nice, so we're getting some of that blue going into red. I seem to have lost some of the lighting coming down the side, and that might be just about getting rid of some, or adding a bit more interest. I guess with only, actually I've kind of overshot the time where I want to start doing the Q&As, and there were still so many things I want to show as well. I mean, it is a really huge subject, lighting in Unreal, and I totally recommend that you go and watch some more videos and learn even more in depth, because it's a really huge subject and the possibilities are amazing. I mean, even a very short amount of time, being able to throw together scenes. I mean, as a block out, I could take this whole thing into Maya now and refine it a lot further, and keep adding more light sources. So thinking about things that would introduce light. So some of the hanging signs in the reference, I'd really like to have, I've still got my reference here somewhere. Yeah, maybe added some emission and made things glow. Have we got enough? No, I should close it off to some Q&A now, but I was going to start talking about IS. Well, let me show you in an image rather than actually doing it in Unreal. So things like IS profiles are really cool, and that's what I was going to show next. But and that's just where you can shape your lights. So being able to take black and white images like this and assign them to your lights, so they project really cool shapes and things everywhere as well. So being able to do nice shaping of lighting and animating these lights is really easy as well. If you want to do, I don't know, white and black light water and animate them around and get those interesting water cosmetics, or so adding movement to these lights is really easy as well. But yeah, I will open it up to any questions for the last 7 minutes. Sorry if that was a bit of a whirlwind of information. Let me see if I can get back to my Q&A section. Cool, these lectures are recorded. Yep, these lectures are going to be recorded and posted onto our YouTube channel, I think, along with the other webinars. They usually take a couple of days before they get pushed out. Where can I find the recording of these sessions? Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, you can find them on our YouTube channel. I think they're going to be posted out fairly soon. But you would have to ask our studio assistant for the exact date. I can actually chase it up and post it out. But these are the kind of questions I like. I've just wanted to see the information at a normal retainable speed, which is good. And like I say, this is a massive subject that we can explore loads. I did do a little video recording pre-doing this, as I tend to practice it out. It was slightly different where I didn't use the sky, but well, it's a very similar version. This is an hour long, so I'll just post that link in the chat, and then you can look over that. But like I say, this one will actually be around type answer. Yes, let's do that. Okay, and that's a good video as well. So, are you able to match the color from the sky to the fog that has been applied to the particle emitter? Does it use the same world settings? Well, that is a very good question, Kieran, and I'm glad you answered it. I'm not sure I 100% have the answer, and that'd be cool, and it should be. Yes, definitely it should inherit. I mean, that's what we did. But there's probably another tick box inside the particle emitter that would allow it to inherit, and I don't know exactly what that is. But I'm sure it's a Tom Hull question. I can ask him and get back to you with an exact answer. But you would like to think so, and I think it does. I think I've seen it in another video that talks about volumetric fog, but I'm not sure if they use the same process, to be honest. So yes, I will get back to you with that one. When you use a light volume to focus the light on an object area, can you see how much you'd like it to blur out into the environment? When you use a light volume to focus on it. Oh, okay. So I guess if we were looking in terms of how it treated the objects differently, if I was looking at my optimization mode, something like light map density, you can see that it's obviously low res the terrain in the way it's calculated, but that had been done based on the importance volume. You can certainly see which areas are getting priority lighting and which ones aren't by just going to your light map density. In the way that it's calculating, or the way it's treating the two separate sections, not entirely. I don't know exactly. So apologies, I don't have a clear answer for you for that one either. I'll fly off into space. I'll wait for any other questions that I might not have the answer for. Oh, I could download an IES profile while I'm quickly to show that as well. Well, I've already downloaded them. I think they'll be in mind. Games Marketplace. Oh, this is no, it's kind of a library. So you can download this one for free. Actually, it's on in Marketplace, and it's just IES Lite profile pack. So I've hit add to project once I've downloaded it. What do we call this? Lighting webinar. Cool. Select add to project. I don't think I need to restart the project. No, cool. So you can see it's just dropped in over here, lighting profile pack. If I click on there and click on profiles, you'll see all these different shapes of lights. I can grab a spotlight and slow down my camera a tad. And as long as it's set to stationary or movable, this won't work on a static light. I can just go down through the options to where it says IES profile and drag and drop. And you can see you're getting some interesting shapes to my lights. Again, maybe just one over here. Cool. And these are used a lot for architectural visualization stuff, certainly all different types of spotlights and kitchens. And you can find, these are ones that were done through Unreal, probably more for effect, but you can find more accurate ones based on actual lights, I should think, online. Nice. No reference image. Okay, I was on the side, just see this. Or even out. Well, I guess there's a few ways. Certainly to look at post-processing. So again, I'll probably drop in another post-processing volume that would allow me to mute it. Let's do that as well, as we've got some dying minutes. So if I type in post-process, so I tend to have two post-processing volumes, one that will give me a neutral look and one that will be for tweaking the overall look of the environment. So if I was looking to blend things, so obviously things like the exposure is one that you're probably going to end up tweaking a tad just to get whatever the correct look. Let me put that on extent unbound as well. So that's just working across everywhere. So certainly in color balancing, like looking at the exposure compensation. So being able to play around with the exposure is going to be able to, is one way that we can start to refine and even out the look. Looking at overall lighting settings, so obviously desaturating things, playing around with the actual saturation. So really nice the post-processing that can be done in lighting. It allows you to add a lot more to the final look or push any values. Like I was trying to get in more of that color and getting that softer blend, which I think is more what we were talking about in the question, just being able to tweak values. I can also take this as an image into Photoshop and change the colors of the whole look, bring that back in and update the look to look more like something that I did in Photoshop. So there's another lookup tables if you're looking into them. Are there any particular effective instances of lighting in recent games you'd recommend as a case study? Well, I did mention Fortnite, I guess, as being really Unreal's driving project at the moment, and looking at what they're doing for the PlayStation 5 and Fortnite in terms of using dynamic lighting and mesh distance builds. And so I think it's a good example of what's running at real time and obviously has a lot going on in the world. I think that would be a good one to look at as a case study in lighting. I mean, in terms of storytelling in lighting, maybe looking at The Last of Us 2, which is a beautifully made game and everything done by Naughty Dogs, just with narrative in mind as well. And I think that's really important as lighting artists. It's not just about what button does what, it's about telling a story with your lighting. And that's why I like to look at cool concept artists that are thinking about framing things within the scene, and it could be down to the importance of characters and how you'd think of them. If I was to first see a character in this blue section, he's immediately, for the rest of a film or something, he would become less important than the car, because that's how it was framed when you're originally seeing it and thinking about narrative and the way you're framing stuff and ideas. It's really important. But in terms of a technical approach to lighting, I think, yeah, definitely looking at things like Fortnite or Last of Us, really good examples of lighting. Cool, that's taken me beyond time, so I hope that you have found that useful.